If you have said to yourself, I should write that, or if someone has said to you, you should write that, then I'm talking to you because you need to write. And that's why you're tuned in to Why Write. Hi, welcome to Why Write. I'm your host, Angela Grout, and I'm here today zooming in with another writer to find out what they're writing, why they're writing, and how they did it, so that if you're looking to write a story, you might just get some really great advice today. So let me introduce my guest, who is a fellow International Women's Writers Guild member with me, and her name is Catharina Coenen, and she has been journal writing since a very early age, like a lot of us. But little did she know that she was fulfilling her grandmother's legacy. And we're going to talk about that today on the show. She is a German immigrant and originally came here to, is it Oregon, correct?
Yes.
Came from Oregon, and she was born into the family of survivors of World War II. She carries stories of her mother and her grandmother and her aunt, and her creative work has appeared in the Southampton Review Online, the Appalachian Heritage, the Christian Science Monitor, and in a lot of places. We're going to talk to her about how she got her work published there. She now teaches at Allegheny College in Medfield, and she studied botany.
It's Meadville.
Meadville, thank you.
Yeah.
See, this is why I need to do my introductions with everyone on. You know, I'm a lover of flowers. I had a flower shop for many years, and she went and studied botany on a Fulbright scholarship. And, you know, she was studying this until the opportunity to write her family's memoirs from World War II kind of seeped into her work. So we're going to talk to her about that and about her book. And Catharina, hold it up. It is the Unexploded Ordnance. And we are going to talk about it because it has won the Restless Books Publishing Award for new immigrant works and writers. So there is so much to talk about, including her unsuccessful search for an agent, which I just think is great. Catharina, welcome to Why Write. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's nice to see you and talk to you. We have not seen each other in person in, I don't know, maybe 3 years or so. At one of the last writers conferences with the International Women's Guild, and since then you have finished your book, you have published it. Congratulations. And you know, I think both of us can honestly say that being a member of the International Women's Writers Guild helped us to get, you know, our voice helped us to improve our writing. You know, how long have you been a member there?
Oh my goodness. I want to say probably 12, 14 years, maybe. Yeah.
And how long did it take? When did you start writing this book, The Unexplained Ordnance?
I started writing this book not knowing that I was writing this book in 2012. So it's been 14 years.
Yeah. And I love that you say not knowing you were writing a book, because you were doing, like, you were journalizing.
I had a sabbatical. So I'm a biology professor at Allegheny College, and I had a sabbatical year where I was supposed to learn about bacterial genetics, and that fell through. And I ended up taking a writing class from one of my colleagues at the college, with the idea that I could maybe integrate some creative writing into my biology classes to help students get interested in plants and in botany. And so in that class, I dutifully tried writing about plants, and I would write essays, and they would start with, you know, sort of family memories about plants. And inevitably, every single essay turned itself into a war story. And it turned out that those were basically anecdotes that my grandmother had told me throughout my childhood, and they kept sneaking into my writing until my dear colleague said, you must just let yourself write this stuff. He's like, is there more? And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot more. And so he said, just let yourself write it. And so my bacterial genetics sabbatical turned itself into a study of German literature, really, because I had the idea that so many German women went through those wartime experiences that I thought there surely must be books that they wrote about that. And so I was really searching for my grandmother's stories, the parts that she didn't tell me about. And then I found out that very few women had managed to publish books about that, and those books that we did have were essentially ignored. And so I scrounged for those that I could find, and then that led to me writing into those gaps. So the things that I wanted to know that I couldn't find anywhere. And I was lucky that I had an education that, while it's not in literature, it's in botany, but it still taught me how to find information and how to dig up things that my grandmother had not told me.
Oh, definitely. Just
And I think the other thing that we need to say start right from the start is like this is not a Jewish memoir, right? So my family is Catholic, so there are a lot of heartbreaking and really important studies and stories by Jewish women who wrote about their wartime experiences. And so part of what was the most difficult thing for me was to write about people who, were also guilty of being part of what Germany did to the Jewish people, the Holocaust, and what Germany did in, attacking other countries starting World War II. So that was like one of my main roadblocks in writing, where I kept asking myself, do I really have a right to tell that story when so many families suffered so much worse than mine did? And so I had to basically crawl out of that guilt hole multiple times, over and over as I wrote, and push up against that. That was a major sort of block. And I finally arrived at the conclusion that we do need everybody's stories, and that part of what scares me about what's going on in the world right now is there are so many people who feel like they're not allowed to tell their story because our stories are complicated. And so I came to the conclusion that not being able to speak about your own pain is actually dangerous. And so I wrote on.
so
And I was lucky in that I had a lot of Jewish friends, and here's also where the International Women's Writing Guild came in for me, right? So here I was reading to them like 3-minute snippets, as we do at our open mics, about those stories, and there were Jewish women writers who came up to me afterwards and said how important that was to them, and really their acceptance and their kindness was a major, major help on my path. And I'm really grateful to them.
yeah, I mean, it really is. There's so much truth to every story needs to be told, from every angle, because if we don't understand them. Now, you came over in your family. How old was your grandmother when did she come to America?
Oh, no, I'm the only person in my family who came to the US. Yeah, my grandmother was still alive when I left. And yeah, but she passed away before I started writing the books.
Okay. Yeah, that's what that. So how old were you when you came to America, and how did your family feel about you coming here? I know you came on a Fulbright scholarship, so.
Yeah, I was 23 and I was supposed to just come for a year. And I think, my mother, um, it was hard for her. It was hard for my entire family to let me go, but they also wanted the best for me. They wanted for me to have the best life that I could possibly have. And they wanted me to be happy. And so I had opportunities in the US that I could never have had in Germany, including teaching at a liberal arts college. So there are no liberal arts colleges in Germany. And I'm really happy working with my students, and that could have never happened if I had stayed.
Yeah, so growing up, your gram would share stories verbally with you, and your mom and your aunt. So it's not like you really took notes back then. So a lot of what was kind of seeping into your work is in it already had seeped into you. So trying to remember and recount the stories that they told, I can see how you had to do some research for that for sure. But what was something that like really helped you to see that what one or two of these stories really has to be shared, not just for me, but for the others?
I think it started with me, right? So there are things that burn a hole in our pocket, right? And so they none of these stories did I so I never put a story down because I thought the world needed to know about it. I put the story down because there was this sort of like internal drive to put the story down. And what happened was that I wrote about those stories like you would write fiction.
Yep.
So this book is a nonfiction book, but each essay has stories that are told from the perspective of someone within that story, and that was not like a writerly trick or something. It was just how the story wanted to be told, and so. In order to do that, as any fiction writer knows, you have to do a lot of research so that you can build that world. What then happened was that some of the research was that I used to build the story told from the perspective of the person in the story, and then I had a heck of a lot of stuff left over that couldn't be told from that perspective because the person didn't know. And so that broader perspective then became the essay that grew up around the story.
So you're writing in your grandmother's voice, you're writing in your aunt's,
Yes.
writing in your mother's voice, you're writing in your voice. So you have all these voices coming through in it. And I personally know that because I always say I write fictional memoirs because I'm writing in that first person. But you are doing the research to get that voice authentic. And I mean, obviously you know these people, they are part of your bloodline here, so it is authentic for you. I know we had talked earlier about how some of this research came to be when you found like this, you got a bag, a little Ziploc bag. Can we talk about like how important, what was in the Ziploc bag and how it helped you to really, nail down some of these stories?
Yeah. So as I was writing, I had a lot of questions for my mother, and my mother was 5 at the end of World War II, so she had childhood memories, but she couldn't tell me where my family was when, and like when exactly the city that they lived in was bombed, and any of those things she didn't know. And but because I asked her so many questions, when I was visiting her, at some point she came out of her storage room with a Ziploc bag and said, these I'm trying to clean out what I have here, and these are the letters of of her father, my grandfather, that he wrote to my grandmother from the Russian front where he was stationed for years. And she said, I don't know what to do with these. I can't read them. Do you want them or should I just throw them out? And I was like, do not throw these out. I will definitely take them. Yeah, and so the problem was that the cursive script that people wrote in Germany at that time was not the cursive that I learned in school or that my mother learned in school. Plus, my grandfather was writing these letters like in a truck or in extreme cold, and between all of these things. They were essentially illegible. My grandmother could read them, obviously, but she wasn't with us anymore. So, but I was like, okay, we'll just sit down and we'll see what we can read. And so we started guessing our way through that, and so we did that together, and we did it whenever I visited home over years. And so in the end, I had like 100 single-space typewritten pages of transcripts of these letters. And also, my grandmother had saved the envelopes the letters came in, and so that told me the addresses of where my family, where my grandmother and her two little girls had fled to from their hometown, and when they were where, because they were postmarked. So that then allowed me to put a sort of plot line that I could hook my grandmother's anecdotes to, and I could understand what had happened
It's
when
so,
and why.
especially between the postmarks, the addresses, all of that stuff is so important. Your book has gotten a lot of really great endorsements, a lot of really good editorial reviews. I mean, you did win the Restless Book Publishing Award. I know you just came back from the Gene Steinman Award, where it literally was a top 10 out
Yes.
of, selected out of, what was it, 1,300 books?
Yeah, at least, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I'm going to read a quote that said that this book is a work of tremendous emotional and intellectual heft. And, just the heaviness of the story that you have within you and that they carried, and then all of the research and everything you did is just I don't even say it's just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Because like you said, so many people have written their stories because they were, survivors of the Holocaust, and being Jewish. And here you are Catholic, and there's still stories to be told because, they're going after the Jewish people. However, you're living in this town that's getting bombed. Your mother's right there in the front lines.
Yeah, so war is terrible for everyone, and that is something that I think that is particularly important for American people to understand because there hasn't been a war on this soil since the Civil War, really. And so it's very hard for Americans to imagine what it's like to be in those bombings, which are happening right now, today.
It's very
And so I think it's an important perspective, but also what most people haven't learned in history books, and what my memoir talks about is that that it didn't start with the Holocaust, right? So before the Nazis the Nazis built the first concentration camps to intern their political enemies. So social democrats and communists were the people for whom those camps were built originally. And then they went for handicapped people and then gay and lesbian people. And so all of them landed in those concentration camps together with the Jewish people. And so those were also parts of history that felt important to unearth and write about. And so in this book, I talk about my mother's older sister who developed a mental illness. And so I wanted to know how that connects to wartime experiences. And it turns out that, yes, we now have really good evidence that wartime experiences for children can trigger mental illness. And also, it helped me understand how my grandmother must have been afraid continuously that her daughter was going to be taken away.
Yeah.
My mother and my aunt landed in an orphanage that was a few miles down the road from where the first gas chambers were built, in a castle in rural southern Germany. And so those were things that were not clear to me, that only became clear to me as I did the research. And so some of the anxieties that my mother has, that I witnessed in my mother, suddenly became much more explicable to me and much more understandable. And some of my childhood experiences.
How has your mom and your family responded to this book?
Oh, this is interesting, right? So my mother doesn't speak any English, so she cannot read my book, and neither can my father.
So
My sister,
translators out there, if you're watching this episode, contact her. Let's translate it.
I would really love to find a German publisher for the book who would.
Your mom is still in Germany?
Sorry?
Your mother is still in Germany?
My family is still in Germany, yes. My parents are still there. My sister is there. And so my mother for my mother had the patience to sit there with me as I would stumble through like impromptu translations of some of the essays that are in here, but she hasn't seen the whole thing. And for her, me writing in English almost felt like a protection, because then she didn't have to worry about, her friends reading the book, who also didn't speak any English, or her neighbors reading the book. So it was almost like I had this space to myself where I could think about things without worrying about so much about
what others would think.
my mother would think. Yeah. And so this distance, right? So leaving my home country was important for being able to see the story with fresh eyes. And my American friends really were the ones who helped me see with fresh eyes.
Wow. Well, I'm gonna change the topic a little bit right now, because now you've published this book, and not only did you when you finished it, you went and tried to get an agent for it. Can we talk a little bit about, and you joked
Yeah.
about this, how it was an
Yeah.
unsuccessful journey, but what made it unsuccessful? Because in the end, it's successful. You're published and it's out there, and it's a
And
very important read.
I do have a lovely agent now. So anyway, it was I had published probably 24 essays or so in literary magazines, and that was very important.
And those essays are part of this in the book. They're excerpts.
Yeah, and so I had a pile of published and unpublished essays that felt like they hung together, and so I was like, well, I probably do have a book manuscript. But when I started learning about book publishing, I also quickly learned that essay collections are not lucrative for publishers to publish. So unless you are famous, they will not. They will be unlikely to
They want a
publish.
novel. They want.
Yeah, and agents live on selling to publishers that give us a lot of money for a book. So an essay collection is not how an agent is going to get money either. But I still in my next sabbatical, I had my manuscript together, and I queried 100 agents, because what I learned in one of my seminars at the International Women's Writing Guild was that you have to query that many to know whether you have a chance to have an agent pick up your book, because agents accept less than 1% of what they get sent. And so unless you query at least 100 people, you haven't really given yourself a chance to be one of those folks who
it's
get
like
picked up.
Speed dating.
Yeah, and so I did that, and my plan was to then next try university presses, because you can query them directly. You don't need an agent to publish a book with a university press. And but I was also at the time, Twitter was still a thing for writers, and so I saw this announcement for the Restless Books Prize come through on Twitter, and I had a good friend, also another IWWG friend. And so I sent her the Twitter announcement. I said, you should really send your book to this contest, because I think it's a really good match. And she said, I'm not ready, but you should. And I'm like, well, do they really want stories from Europe? And so at the last minute, right before the contest closed, I was like, what the heck? I'm just going to send it in. Here's a shout out to my friend Elita Suratman, who really made me do this. And then I was really surprised to hear that I had won the contest, and that they were going to publish my book. And I couldn't have hit upon a better publisher. So Restless Books is in Amherst, Massachusetts. So it's right in your neck of the woods. They publish wonderful work, and they still edit. And that was important to me, because I knew that a pile of essays is not a book. And I knew that I had to learn how to shape that collection into something that would carry the reader through. So what what my readers tell me is it doesn't read like an essay collection, it reads like a novel, and that's in large part due to the wonderful editor that I found at Restless Books, who helped me figure out how to get there.
Yeah, I mean, and it really is important to have a really good editor. And the fact that for writers out there who are saying, how do you get published? Enter, yes, query agents, but definitely enter some of these contests because, you enter them, whether you're sending an excerpt of the book or the whole manuscript, if they're interested, they're going to help you, and we got to get our stories told. So,
And a lot of the smaller presses will allow you to query them directly. So they have reading periods when you can submit your book directly to them.
now, what's next for you? We write more to publish?
I would love to, and I have ideas for I have ideas for a new book, and there's more to be written about the history of the town in Germany that I grew up in. And I also want that book to be about wheat. And so I'm a botanist, so I'm interested in plants. I'm also someone who is sensitive to wheat. And that is not just me, that's a lot of people nowadays. Like 1 in 20 have some kind of wheat sensitivity. Some people have celiac disease, and some people have other ways in which their bodies respond poorly to wheat. And so I want to explore that in connection with exploring the long history of the city I grew up in. And the underlying idea is, how have we made a plant that humans created, right? So the wheat that we grow and eat does not exist in nature. We crossed wild wheats to get there. How have we shaped that over human history in a way so that now we can't eat it anymore? Which, it's a plant that's really helped us build our culture.
Yeah, and it's interesting
We
because
have
it's something
now,
that is universal, whether it's in Germany or America, and you bringing the stories, from Germany is amazing. I mean, you could take the girl out of Germany, but you can't take the Germany.
no,
Which we do. We carry the stories of our ancestors,
yes,
they
we do.
because we're grateful that it shaped us for who we are and how we are, and the fact that your grandmother, should have been writing her stories and now you've carried out her legacy. So where can people get your book? I mean, this is a book that I think everybody needs to read. It's I always find it's way better to read something like your book than a history book because you're right there. You put us right there in the moment. So where can they find Unexploded Ordnance and get
Yeah,
more information on you too?
yeah. So my website is catharinacoenen.com, and it has a multiple ways to find my book. You can order it from bookshop.org, or if you are an Amazon user, they certainly have it there also. It's also out on Kindle. And you can ask your local bookshop to order it for you. It's distributed by Ingram, so all bookshops should have no problems getting it for you. And so it should be easy to get your hands on it.
Okay, well, I'm going to add all those links, and I'll get all the proper links too to make sure that we have it here so people can click in and buy it for sure. And, Katerina, thank you so much for coming on. I am really just so interested in your story, and I'm so excited on how you did the story. So thank you so much for being a guest on this show, and I look forward to staying in contact with you and hearing more about your work.
Thank you for your work. It's really important for writers to be in contact and form communities. We can really help each other and encourage each other. So thank you for your work.
You're very welcome, and thank you, and thank you to Studio 954 for making this podcast possible to be streaming online through local cable channels on YouTube, Amazon, Apple, Spotify. So wherever you are, I hope that you will subscribe. It's free, and this is how writers get their work out, by talking about what we do. So please check out Catharina Coenen, check out her work. Check out all of the different writers that I've had on this podcast. And I thank you for tuning in each week, or maybe you're binge watching this because, that'd be great too. And if you're writing a story, please reach out to me when you're done. I'd love to have you on the show. This is the time of the broadcast where I give you a writing prompt. So I want to give you this prompt, and when the show's over, like I say, usually set your phone timer, your microwave timer, whatever it is, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Sometimes you just sit down for 5 minutes, that's all you need, and to start a story. And today, we were talking with Catharina Coenen about, telling stories in someone else's voice. I often call it fictional memoir, but when you're telling truth, and you need to tell that story. She's used her grandmother's voice, her aunt's voice, her mother's voice. There are voices out there that have a story to be told. So, what I want you to do is, I want you to write about a time in your life in someone else's voice. I mean, it might be when your father taught you how to ride a bike. Tell us that story from his voice. It may be the day of your graduation. It may be, who knows, something that's going on in the world right now. Sit down, choose someone else to see it through their eyes and write that story. And again, you're just setting it for 5 or 10 minutes, and you're writing a story through an authentic voice, in the I format, first person. That's not yours. So have fun and explore. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Why Write. My name is Angela Grout, and I am so appreciative that you've come on the show. And again, thank you to my guest, Katerina. Have a great day. See you next time.
Bye bye.